respecting the space I'm in. If this was a mosque, I'd have taken my shoes off. If it was a Christian church, I might have lit a candle before I speak to people. Just a sign of respect of all the differences between us and all the similarities of who we are in our homage to a greater God than ourselves. The circumstances that bring me to speak are non-Jewish. I'm not Jewish in a synagogue. In themselves are quite extraordinary. Anybody drop this, guys?
Oh, they bought a gift.
The circumstances that bring me to speak to you are really in themselves quite extraordinary. I never imagined that I would be addressing people in a synagogue. They occurred 3 years ago when I brought some of our Jewish clients from Smart Tours to the door of this historic building, bid them a good afternoon, reminded them, like I did you, what time the ship sails. As I was leaving, an English tourist stopped to ask me directions, so I was delayed, and I hear my voice being called from inside, a voice that I did not recognize. Granville, Granville. So thinking somebody had fallen over, something had occurred to one of my group, I come running in, and I find you all sitting here as you are now. And a tall, gaunt, I would say elegant man was calling my name. Are you Granville, he says, in Greek. Yes. Why you talk to your group outside, he says. Feeling that I was maybe breaking a rule that I was speaking outside, I said, oh, I apologize. No, he says, you must speak inside. Inside, I said. What am I going to say inside a synagogue? You will speak for me, he said. My immediate reply was, sorry, I don't think I can. Why, he said. Because I will cry, I said. No, he said, you will speak for me. That's how I met Sammy Modiano the first time, ladies and gentlemen. And that's where I shared his story through questions and answers, through translating him from Greek into English to that group of people just like yourselves who sat in front of me. Did I cry? My heart broke 1,000 times. With every full stop, with every comma, I shuddered the realities as empathetically I received the experience of this 13-year-old child, now in his late 80s. The story was harrowing, but what was extraordinary for me on that first day was he did not linger on sensationalism, because we know the story. There are books and there are films of which I've wrenched, as indeed we all have our hearts, on the inhumanity of our humanity. Not just the perpetrators of evil, but those who look in the other direction when evil occurs. Even with that foreboding inside that there's something not right about a situation that is going wrong. Sammy's words struck such a deep chord in my heart, and I will tell his story, but when I walked away, I was shaking with the question inside myself, why did you put yourself through that? Why did you break down in front of so many fellow travelers? However close you've become to them over the last few days as their tour director, is it your job to do this? So why are you doing it, Granville? Why are you rawing yourself, making yourself raw? That why, in the processing of it, and it went on for weeks, became nothing next to the why, the monumental why I experienced that this 13-year-old boy had lived for over 60 years. On that fateful day, on the 23rd of July, 1944, it was Sammy Modiano's 13th birthday. It was the day the Nazis gathered up all the Jews of the Dodecanese Islands, this area of Greece that we're in. There were Jews all over Greece, but now we're focusing on this part of Greece, on this group of 12 islands. One of the first questions was an angry one of those entitled voices that is still searching for healing. Did they do nothing to help you? Not from our group, from a stander-by, a listener. Sammy's reply was so gentle. He said, what could they do? This machine, this gathering of the Jewish and the enemies of the Third Reich had been going on. It was a well-oiled wheel. Of course they hid our children if they could. Of course in the dead of night they took them to neighboring islands to save their lives. Of course they hid people in the basements of their houses at pain of their own death. Even the Turkish ambassador, if you remember Maria's history story, Rhodes was occupied by the Italians 1912 when the Arabs exchanged it, and these islands then belonged to the Italians. What did that mean? You had to get Italian papers. Sammy was born during the Italian period. Many of the elders of the Jewish community had not changed from the Arab Ottoman rule papers to the Italian papers. So who came over? The Turkish ambassador comes over from Turkey and he says to the Nazis, these people are mine. And the Nazis said, but they have Jewish papers. He said, no, they have Jewish names. Their papers are Turkish. These people were saved. The Nazis were nervous of interfering with the East because that was the next promise of their conquer. So, 1,604 Jewish families, children, men, women, were gathered on that fateful day, put into the largest boats that were cattle boats that left from here to the port of Piraeus, put onto trains, and delivered to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the death camp of the Nazis. The journey took 1 month, and you can imagine the conditions. Sweltering heat, the young, the old, the infirm. A picture of horror that we have in the books and the films that we've seen. When they arrived at the camp, the doctor, whose name will never pass his lips, with one finger, not vocalizing, created 2 lines. One was the able-bodied line. Sammy was only 13, but he joined that line with his sister and with his father. He was the youngest. The other line, the infirm, the old, the weak, the babies, the pregnant, was never seen again. Sammy's mother had died a few years before, and he blesses the day that she departed, that she didn't have to live through the hell and the inferno that his 13-year-old eyes witnessed. One of the questions was, did you lose your faith? He says, yes, I did. I looked to God and I said, do your eyes see what my eyes see? One detail, he says, the working. Up early in the morning, crust of bread, dirty water, working all the hours of the day, another crust of bread halfway through the day. If anybody stopped, even for more than a few seconds, brought to the front, shot in the head. Inhuman treatment, and that was the nicest part. The nicest part. Sammy's why rocked my world. This monumental why of this gentle stranger who, as he spoke that first day, his hand nervously tapping the smudge of the number on his left forearm, the number that he'd been admitted into this death camp with. I, as Granville, I, as you, with your humanity, I'm reminding you now of your humanity, wanted to put my arms around him and say, of course you survived to tell this story. Of course you survived. That was the reason you survived. How many people, I thought when I was processing it, crying over my lunch afterwards. How many people over 60 years, when he lived in the hell of his own silence, had done that, who knew him better than me, hugged him, said, darling, you survived to tell your story. Then the first revelation to myself. You can't give anybody their why. Even the children you love more than your life itself must find their own answers to their own whys. And that's an inward journey. We look outward to find the reasons why this happened, why that happened. You know what? This is the direction. Inside, deep down inside, wading through all those doubts, all those fears, all those insecurities, all the whys of the begin when we're born. Life is a why. The evolution of our journey, our spirit, our soul. And Sammy's why conquered me. Some of those whys I had fell away like they never existed next to him. Others remained for me to find my way within. In 1944, early 1945, the first Allies, the people who were overcoming the evil arrived at Auschwitz. Auschwitz was liberated by the Russians. They got there first. The Germans, knowing the game was up, created something called the March of Death. In the wooden shoes the inmates wore with those fleece-ridden cloths that they wore, in the freezing winter temperatures, were marched through the cracked, broken earth and the ice, collapsing as they walked, to a field or forest where they were shot to be put in a mass grave, to hide the evidence of the atrocity. Sammy, I have to say, does not speak of 6 million Jews. He speaks of 11 million human beings. The prisoners of the Germans were also homosexuals, gypsies, political prisoners, not just the Jewish people. 11 million people, and that's just a random count. God knows if there were many more. Killed in the most inhuman ways because their way of life did not suit the arrogance of somebody else. Sammy collapsed. He was a bag of bones. Were you alive? I was more dead than alive, he said. And he could feel the bullets singing by his ears. He wanted a bullet. He wanted it to end. It was enough. What had happened during those months he was in the camp, he'd go out every morning into the compound, dividing the men and the women with a high electric fence, looking for his sister. She was in the female compound, of course. All the girls looked the same. They had shaven heads.
Right.
He looked and he looked every morning before he went to work. And one day, a girl starts going. So he takes out the piece of bread he'd saved. Every day he saved some bread. And he threw it high over the fence. And she ran. She picked it up. She took out the bread she had in her pocket. She wrapped the two pieces together and she threw them back, gesturing, "You are smaller than me. You must eat to get strong." He ran to his father. He said, "I found her. Come and see her. I found her." His father said, "Sammy, I can't walk. My legs. I have to see the doctor." He begged his father not to see the doctor. He never saw his father again. He never saw his sister again. So that bag of bones that collapsed on the March of Death was an orphan in every capacity of the word. He's revived by a Russian female doctor. He comes to, and his tiny bones and limbs are being rubbed to try and get life to circulate again. And he learns. They were about to throw the child into the mass grave, and somebody said, "The child alive." He had Italian papers because he was born during the Italian occupation. He was sent to Italy as an orphan. In Italy he grew up. He came back here when it was time to come back, to see what was left of somewhere where he spent his childhood. He's not a rabbi, he was a little boy. This is where he grew up. All the congregation were his family. All of them knew him. But there were so few left. He met his wife here, beautiful lady who he marries with, and they live in Rome. A few years ago, the Italian government understood his work, that he was on a mission of humanity, sharing his story when finally the truth exploded out of him after 60 years of hell, trapped inside your head with that why. Why me? Why me? Why me? Silently torturing yourself. That impossible question, the why. I asked him. I was afraid. I kept on coming back. The why drew me back. The why for me was the key, maybe to even my own freedom. His why. His why was contagious. I know we all have whys. I knew that. One day I dared to say, what happened that released you? I heard two versions, different ones at different times. One was he read a book of a survivor, and he read his own story. Something in him exploded, erupted. This was my life, I need to speak of it. Another version he told me once was, it was the children of the world, the children of the schools of Italy, who nowadays the Italian government sponsors him to take them to Auschwitz concentration camp, to relive his story within the situation that those months of terror invaded the life, the heart, the psychology, the spirit of this young child. Blessed by whatever forces there are, whatever God we wish to call him, to survive and share a story so tormenting.